Ultimate has been defeated. Another race to world first for Final Fantasy XIV with Kindred bringing it home. However, many questions have arisen. Where does this race go? Have we reached the limit? The controversies and all the teams that are getting disqualified and brought out of it, it's a bit of a mess right now. So let's dig into what the hell is happening with this fledgling race to world first. Before we get into the crux of this, let me just give a shout out to Display. A wonderful Mr. Chris has created some wonderful things for Display that you can check out there and use our promo code for the biggest discount you can get on the website. There's a couple of new ones up there, but it is site-wide. You can get anything you want on there, so enjoy that. As somebody who has been involved in the Race to World First since its inception in World of Warcraft all those years ago, I am honestly intrigued, excited, trepidatious about the growing pains that FF14's Race to World First is currently going through after having lived through them in the past. And I think it's well worthy of a discussion. The latest Ultimate, Futures Rewritten, has just gone down. Kindred bringing home that world first as Echo putting on the big show came in at 4th place and all kills happening within a few hours of each other as to how close it came after several days of pushing against the hardest content there is. Now, let's talk about where this is going, the future, the problems they're having, and thoughts and suggestions on this. There's also been some big comments because the Race to World First for Final Fantasy XIV isn't exactly new. It's been around since forever, but usually it was taken care of by Mog Talk, who are now involved with Echo and producing this show, and Mr. Frosty there leading it, tracking it, and trying to enforce some community rules for the people who break those rules. And we're going to get to that in a second. Okay. First of all, it's obviously of interest to the community to have a big Race to World First. Viewership is on the up and up. Now it's on a grander stage where money's being invested, in-person events, all those kind of things are starting to happen. Casters and all that exciting stuff is happening with Final Fantasy XIV as it has happened with World of Warcraft, and people are getting more and more awareness of it happening. It's great to see as it's going up, but not without its problems. You see, Final Fantasy XIV is unique to World of Warcraft in many, many ways, and these are things that they're going to have to solve in order to make the Race to World First as big and as popular and as simple to follow as World of Warcraft's is. Not that there isn't multitudes of drama that happens over there as well, as it does in any competitive environment. And a lot of people don't get the competitive side of it, is winning is everything. You don't do all this and do all this preparation to come second. That's not what you're after. And unfortunately, when winning is everything, people will take every shortcut possible in order to gain that win, because if you're not first, you're last in the idea of many competitive players. And it's also caused a surge of top prominent teams seeing that there is a foundation, there's a support structure, there is a vision and a goal to strive for now in what was previously, as it was in World of Warcraft, just a fun community thing. And of course, the community is going to have some pushback on that, and rightfully so. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, let's talk about the problem that FF14 is facing. There's two issues that I foresee here. The first one is the obvious one that everyone talks about, and that is the use of add-ons and plugins. In World of Warcraft, they are not immune to this problem either, despite the fact that add-ons and plugins are a welcome add-on and vision for World of Warcraft and have been since its beginnings, all the way back in 2004. Now, a lot of people over there, especially in recent couple of years, have argued that all add-ons should be banned in World of Warcraft. Generally speaking, what they're talking about is stuff that affects raiding and gameplay. They're not actually talking about the thing that makes their UI look pretty or anything like that, or presents game information in a way that is much more easy to digest than the standard UI. What they're talking about is things that massively indicate what your character should be doing at any time and taking control and agency away from the players in order to fulfill a task on a raid encounter or a dungeon encounter or something like that. It's not difficult to tune into any of the top teams. You can go and check out someone like Gingy on Twitch while doing, say, a Mythic Plus dungeon and see astronomical amounts of information and add-ons and sound effects and things popping up to track the most minute piece of information, including what abilities other players in the groups have, let alone what the enemies are doing. And when you go into the Race to World First for World of Warcraft, and Scripe had a good thought on this in his feedback for this Ultimate, is that a big part of the Race to World First is outside coders and workers who are developing and building add-ons for the players to counter what's going on in the fights themselves. Now, this came to a head. A little history lesson for you here from someone who is old in this environment is that we ended up with an arms race. Add-ons made the fights too easy, so the developers in World of Warcraft made the fights harder, which led to more complex add-ons being developed in order to counter that increased difficulty, so they pushed the envelope and created a circular system of just increasing difficulty that relied more and more on add-ons and more people installing add-ons and using them. This kind of came to a head during the Queen Ashara mythic encounter all the way back in Battle for Azeroth, where they created such complex mechanics involving dances where each individual player was assigned a very specific task at a very specific point in the room, that in fact the add-ons got so complex that they had a mother brain add-on on one player, and that would receive the information, and then all the other players would have a different add-on, and that add-on would then communicate with that add-on to tell all those players what they should do based on what the mother brain decided people should be doing. Not fun, and we all used it because it was by far the best way of dealing with a mechanic that would kill you if you didn't deal with it extremely quickly, and waiting for every player in the raid to get their correct solution based on the debuffs and things they got. Now, Yoshida, the game director of Final Fantasy XIV, has been quite outspoken in this with community letters. In the current stance of FF14, all add-ons and plugins are against the team terms of service. Absolutely not allowed under any circumstances. Now, grain of salt, and let's, for all of our sakes, be real here. Use of add-ons and plugins in Final Fantasy XIV and the PC version is rife. It is everywhere, and unabashedly so. You can inspect anybody's plate, their adventure plate, which is a little ID card that you can make for your character that other people can check out, and you will see very blatant references to the fact that they are using add-ons, and if you make friends with them, they can share you to their inner group. All these kinds of things are happening all the time. So what is going on? If it's against the TOS, why are these people not banned? It's because Yoshida, who takes raiding very, very seriously, really just doesn't want add-ons and plugins to affect the gameplay of the game. Having an RP add-on, I personally don't think they really care about. They're not bothered. And in fact, in many cases, if an add-on becomes so widespread that everybody is using it, they will ban people for it, and then a little while later, that functionality is added to the game because they agree it's a good idea. A great example of this would be debuff timers. That's right, the fact that your debuffs that you get have a time ticking down of when it's going to activate. That didn't exist in the game. People used plugins in order to track that information. People got banned for it, and then it's in the game now, right? These kind of things are what's been going on in FF14 because the devs agree, actually, this is probably a good idea, and the fact that so many of you are doing it, it makes sense. But there are certain limits they don't want to break because they don't want to end up in the arms race that I just explained to you did happen in World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft has learnt from that for the most part, and has endeavored and done pretty well, not perfect, in trying to create more encounters that simply do not require add-ons at all. They've done okay with this, with a few missteps, but they're getting better and better at being more about execution. You can clearly solve the puzzle. We're not going to create something with a game that some of you have played for 20 years that you can't solve very quickly. We're just going to make it very hard to achieve that. But every piece of information you need is very visual, it's very obvious. We can work with simple things like an energy bar, etc., etc. And they've been endeavoring to do that because the arms race just does not work. And for Yoshida, his point was very clear. They do not want to create encounters over at Square Enix that have to bear in mind that people are going to break the game via plugins in order to defeat them, because then they just have to create different styles of encounters, which they don't want to do, and also separates the player base from those who strictly don't use any add-ons whatsoever, a huge disadvantage. Now, why is this a problem? Should be simple, right? Well, not really, and this is where this grey, murky area, which many of you will fall into different categories of, exist. Latency. Latency plugins are pretty widespread in the FF14 raiding community. Why? FF14 has a massive problem. Look, I love the game. I really do. I love raiding in it. But it is a clown show. It's so bad. Compared to World of Warcraft, I'm not being a fanboy here. It's just infinitely better over there. So players install add-ons to try and negate this effect. And also, this counts for geographical location, where maybe you just have higher latency because you're further away from the servers. Is it fair that you should be either a burden or playing with some massive weight around your neck simply because of where you live? And many would argue, no, that's not particularly fair. And others would say, doesn't matter, tough luck, you're not allowed to use plugins. Well, that's a grey area. It can also get worse. Logs. Tracking what's going on in the game. This is also widespread in FF14. Technically, it's not allowed. Tracking what happened to your player. Who's doing damage? Is the class balance good right now? Many would argue right now there's a particular class in the game that's causing a bunch of problems and making the encounters significantly easier, but logs allow you to not only track that information, to see what's going on, and to see what kind of damage is coming out, all these kinds of things. Logging is a very, very crucial part of progress rating in any MMO. Technically, it's not allowed. It absolutely happens in FF14. Along with things like damage meters, not allowed. Many could argue that recording yourself is third-party usage and technically against the terms of service. The ability to have every perspective from all your players when a very complex mechanic happens and being able to go back and say, well, from my POV, I couldn't see what the problem was. However, if we check everybody's, oh, it all comes together. Another great example was the fact that FF14 raiders, the serious ones, use ultra-wide monitors. This actually gives you a better and clearer perspective of the battle arena, making encounters easier. It was actually one of the biggest issues with production when we had the Savage race here at PG Towers, is that when we were setting up, it turned out all the players used ultra-wides. And we were like, what the hell? We don't even know how to capture that properly for the viewer experience. Plugins exist that can change your perspective on your non-ultra widescreen to look ultra widescreen and to emulate that effect, giving you the advantage. Is that allowed? Well, many would argue, simply because I can't afford to go and buy an ultra wide monitor just for raiding, that it should absolutely be allowed. Zoom hacks, all these kinds of things that have led to many, many controversial dramas and disallowments, including stern letters from Yoshida himself, have been a part of the Race to World First scene in Final Fantasy XIV for quite some time. What is the solution to this? We'll get that to a second. Let's talk about the second issue, difficulty. One thing I'm noticing, and there are many reasons for this, is that this time to clear a lot of their harder content is getting faster and faster and faster. The same thing happened with World of Warcraft. What is going on? Teams are getting better. There's a platform now, there's a stage, there's an aim, there's a goal, there's a place to go with my ability to play at a very high level in this game. And as such, more and more tools are becoming available. I'm not talking about plugins here, I'm talking about things like analysts, VOD reviews, all these kinds of things are becoming more and more widespread. Some teams are recruiting 4, 5 big brains to watch everything and to come up with solutions. Multiply that by multiple teams working on the Race to World First, and suddenly you don't have an enclosed, simply community guild only, static only environment where it's just you guys trying to figure it out, and it's being broadcast by all these live streams. In fact, you have dozens of people all trying to solve these solutions, and then with streaming actually broadcasting the solution out to everybody, which is why the latest Ultimate resulted in first kill. Literally less than a pull later, the second kill. A couple of hours later, the next kill. Echo killed it the second they woke up. Their first pull of the day, they defeated the Ultimate because the solutions are out there on how to solve these problems, and execution is less of a deal there than it is in World of Warcraft in comparison to overcoming some ridiculous RNG element. They solved it, it went down. What is the response to this, and why is this a problem? This could be a problem if it's a case of it's going so fast, it's not really worth putting on any sort of event. Now, I know many of you will be like, so? I kind of see where you're coming from. I love the Race to World First. I always have. Not just because I'm involved in it, because I'm a fan. I love seeing the best of the best challenge the best encounters ever. And now we're at a point where potentially we may be reaching the limits of what is viable from an even business perspective of having a Race to World First, because they're going so fast that it's just not financially viable to make that money back via Twitch subscriptions and ad revenue and sponsorships and things like that. If the event is going to run, the last Savage race ran just a few hours. It was like 7 or 8 hours. It was done. The latest Ultimate, 3 or 4 days compared to the expected 5 or 6. right? Those couple of days really matter in terms of getting everybody in, getting casters, getting the players there, having these wonderful events that are so fun and people want to see, but it's just not financially viable without some interest from elsewhere. And this is where these two issues meet. Would Squeenix be incentivized to create more difficult content in order to enhance the race to world first? My obvious answer, and I think many of you would agree, is no. They clear those encounters. Yoshida himself clears those encounters before they are released to the public. In fact, an issue recently was that they had to nerf an encounter by just 1%, right, World of Warcraft fans? Yeah, 1% to a boss nerf. And the reason was they had cleared it so many times internally, because what they do is check that any group combo will work, these job mixes work, and the fight is doable with whatever the players want to bring. It's got enough difficulty, the classes are balanced effectively, all those kinds of things, that they got so comfortable with the fight that they were doing more damage due to familiarity than what was intended for progress rating. And it made it really hard on other guilds that just did not have that repetition, those reps under their belt, and they had to nerf it, which led to an immense apologetic letter from Yoshida. So they don't want to go down that road, but they want the clear message there is they want their encounters to be doable by the target audience and not to create what has happened in World of Warcraft, which is niche encounters that are clearly just designed for the top 10 guilds in the world. And World of Warcraft has made some serious missteps with that, especially in their last raid in Rubar Palace, where they did not get that curve correctly, and hundreds of guilds became smashed against encounters that they had no hope whatsoever of defeating in the first weeks, and had to wait for substantial nerfs in order to be able to overcome it, which is not fun for the wider community, and FF14 certainly does not want to go down that road. Never say never, but very, very unlikely. And when I spoke to Yoshida in person, and we talked about these things, ideas like that would come in the form of something new, like Giga Ultimate, but considering Ultimate and also Savage is a niche product for very people, having a super niche product, probably not. And I don't think that's the right thing either, in order to have the community, especially when they release their content in either 4 boss stints and not the 8 or 9 bosses that we see in World of Warcraft. It's probably not a great idea. I don't think it should go down that road, but it does limit the possibility of the race. So how do we fix these solutions? I think there's been an excellent tweet post from Frosty, who's been involved in a Race to World First Final Fantasy XIV since its inception, and has now been trying to manage and enforce, and the burden has fallen on his shoulders to try and create some community rules. As I pointed out, Kindred got the world first this time. However, technically, Grind did. The guild known as Grind did pick up the world first. However, a leaked screenshot showed that they were using plugins. Or one of their players was using plugins. A simple plugin with a red dot on the screen, similar to FPS players will be very familiar with this, that showed the exact position of their character. The problem is that in itself, maybe not that big of a deal, but it's a tool that also comes with a bunch of other abilities in order to do things. How do we fix this? It's tough. Frosty has suggested many things, such as, look, if it's against the TOS, you're just not involved anymore. Like, anything you're doing that's against the TOS is out. We'll stick to Squeenix's rules on this one. A POV has to be streamed. It's the best we can do right now. Now, rightfully so, they're aware that streaming in and of itself isn't actually a solution, because there are many things, similar to how Guild Wars 2 does things, where you can overlay things. World of Warcraft almost ran into this problem until the devs very quickly jumped on it to stop the idea of third-party overlaid things onto the game that can be hidden from a streaming perspective taking place. FF14 has that as well, and they can't solve that just by streaming, but it is the best solution we have right now. Here's what I would love to see. I think, personally, as a fan of the Race to World First, that there is a huge possibility here to make this as big an event as it is for World of Warcraft. The Race to World First in WoW is the biggest event that players get involved in, and viewers, especially long-time players, that exists year-round. It dwarfs everything else they do. It's a big deal, and people love it, and watching the viewership numbers rise for 14, it could be that as well. But I do think, unlike what I believe about the WoW Race to World First, where I don't particularly want Blizzard involved, I think in the FF14 case, Square Enix could get involved, where they can add that financial support that may not be present in the current situation that Echo is facing, which is like, it just doesn't quite last long enough, so maybe smaller scale events are the future rather than the big in-person stuff, because it's difficult to know whether or not this is going to be worthwhile or not, and we can't just make a loss on these things, despite the fact that people love it. To get involved, invite some teams, and have them in person so that they literally have to show their gameplay, which is what Echo did. They had all their players, or 7 out of 8 of them, in person so they can see the screens. There's no shenanigans going on. There's no overlays going on. It's all very obvious and apparent what they're doing. Having that in person, and I will admit there's a big bias because I've wanted, since its inception of the Race to World First, to have the top 3, 4, 5 teams in person doing it. But considering there's so much representation in FF14 from Japan, North America, and Europe, you could have a major event that would be well worthwhile, multiple language casting teams, all that, super fun. And of course, knowing that Yoshida loves his raiding, there's a possibility of that happening, and eliminate this idea of cheating going on in the background. Now, the question is, who gets to go? How do you decide? That I don't have an answer for. Because the tracking system, how do you know someone didn't cheat all their way up until being in contention? Is it based on your previous performance? Does it become a case of rich get richer? Is it an invitational? I don't know. I don't know. But I would like to find out. But I would love to see your thoughts on this. Do you think the Race to World First for Final Fantasy 14 is just super niche and it doesn't really matter? Or would you like to see this grow into something special? You guys let me know, and I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.